Good afternoon. We're delighted to be joined in person by Tor Wennesland, the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process. Just brief the Council, make some opening remarks, and then take some questions. Tor, please. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. We have had a Council where there is a broad consensus around the narrative whereby in order to off-ramp a possible conflict to be imminent, there need to be a pushback on activities in and around Jerusalem and the West Bank. There need to be some degree of consolidation when it comes to the stability of the PA and UNRWA for that part. And also the work ongoing in Gaza need to be continued. I have stressed to the Council the fact that some of these conflict drivers are actually quite destabilizing. A situation whereby salaries cannot be paid by UNRWA or the PA is a conflict driver in itself. If it comes in parallel with increased settler activity, announcement of settlement, and all sorts of other violence upticking at the West Bank, we have a very toxic situation. Well, what is the problem with this? The problem is very simply the following. It's very difficult to get to the medium term and long term if the situation around is very unstable. That is a key problem strategically for me as a special coordinator, and it's a key dilemma for the Security Council that is obviously, clearly, as with the parties, frustrated that we cannot get into a different dynamic where we can drive the politics in a direction where we can calm down the situation and address the long-term issues. So this is where we are, guys, for the moment. And any questions? I'm ready to take it.
James Bays, Al Jazeera.
Yeah.
When you look at
you stay closer to the mic.
when you look at the situation, it still looks pretty grim. But perhaps the only positive things, the Quartet seems to be re-emerging. How important is that? And also, perhaps there's more US engagement with the US ambassador recently in the region. Do you think that's important?
Well, as you know very well, there is a clear support from the Secretary General to lift the work of the Quartet to the principal levels as soon as possible and take initiatives that can provide a political horizon that can be a part of dealing with the whole situation. Well, there are some realities in this world also connected to the Quartet members. So the work for the envoys and myself is to push forward in setting up a program whereby we can get to that point, because I think it's very important. The Quartet meeting we had in Oslo, in parallel with the HLC meeting, was actually the first one the envoys have had for more than 2 years. It doesn't mean that we don't have a lot of contacts. I can assure you we are in weekly contact as envoys to see how we better can kind of get together, get over the hurdles, and get into a constructive way of dealing with the medium and long term. And there are very important medium-term stuff the Quartet could address. We are identifying that and see how we can patch it together. But we are in the balance between the medium term and the acutely short term, where actually a lot of the work is about not tipping over the red line where we will really end up in another nasty drive.
Thank you. Edie Leder, Associated Press.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wennesland. A follow-up on the Quartet and then another question. The Russian Deputy Ambassador said today that they would like to see a ministerial meeting of the Quartet. There seemed to be some opposition. Are you in favor as a Quartet member of raising the level of engagement of the four parties to a ministerial session? And if so, when do you think it might happen, or the next contacts or serious meetings could happen. And then as a question I was going to ask, has there been any movement at all on trying to bring the Palestinian parties, rival Palestinian factions, together?
The UN position is that the Quartet should meet at the principles level. This is my position. This is the position of the Secretary General, and the Secretary General has discussed this with other members of the Quartet. We are not there yet, and I'm not going to give you a timeline for that at all, but I can tell you one thing: we are working very hard as envoys when we meet and when we talk to see how we best can put an instrument like the Quartet principles to the best use politically. And I can assure you, the Quartet is not a statement fabric. The Quartet is a political entity for change and for addressing the long-term parameters. So we have to be rather cautious here, so we do it the right way, and we have to dare going the intermediate steps as well. But it's work in progress. To the last issue, I mean, it's the Egyptians that are mainly holding the inter-Palestinian talks, and it's going in Cairo. This is a bumpy ride, and it would have been a bumpy ride for anyone who is involved in it. There are moments that there are good dynamics that, for example, led to the agreement of holding of elections in Palestine that subsequently became off-ramped. But the dynamics around and between the fractions that took place in late last year and early in January led to the decision of holding elections in order to kind of, and the point with that was to leapfrog detailed discussions on where you go deep into the weeds between the fractions on things they haven't been able to resolve for a long time. Therefore, it was a tragic situation that these elections was cancelled, because it was a setback for democracy in Palestine, and it was definitely a setback for Palestinian unity.
Ray Bouchafra from Sky News Arabia. More and more countries from the Middle East and the Gulf countries, also North Africa, are normalizing with Israel. As special envoy, how do you see these coming steps? Are they creating a positive environment, or you see it something else? Thank you.
Listen, UN and the Secretary General is strongly in favor of these agreements and the potential they have for calming down the situation in the Middle East and get it out of a situation whereby you can embark on practical cooperation between countries. It's a reflection of changes that has taken place in Israel over time, politically and economically, and the same goes for the countries that have signed agreement with Israel. I'm all for it. So, has it been possible to leverage these things in relation to the Israeli-Palestinian issue? Yes, on one point so far, very important. The annexation of the Jordan Valley could have easily taken place if the foot was not put down on ground from the Emiratis upon signing this agreement. It was a sine qua non for that one to move forward. How we can leverage it later, it is not really the main focus of any of the parties to these agreements at the moment, but there may be an opportunity to do it later, and I'm sure on that. And I'm in constant contact with both Israel and the signatories to these agreements directly to see how we can leverage that on down the line.
Last question, Emma.
Yes, thank you very much. Evelyn Leopold, Pass Blue. Is the two-state solution still on the table, or is it something to be pushed in the future for smaller, achievable goals?
We have walked that line for 25 years. I mean, I'm not going to kind of give you the deadline for when we stop dealing with it, but I can tell you one thing. I met Sipi Livni 1.5 weeks ago in the region, and she had a very good analysis on the whole thing. She said, in order to have the Israel the Israeli want, and the state the Palestinian want, this is the only way out. Because otherwise we get something in the middle that we cannot handle, neither the Palestinians nor the Israelis. But then she said one more thing. The problem is that people don't understand how complicated it is to work out the details. And I can tell you, I mean, I have myself been looking at why can't we get this stuff done in a way? And here is one of the issues. I have spent some weeks in my life walking the delineation around the growing settlements at the West Bank. I've been in the blind zones between the wall and the villages, and I've seen the expansion of the settlement project over time. I can tell you, if we are going to settle up and stitch up what I will call a border based on the 67 line, it is some time of a work. Why? Because the guys who lost the property owned the property, and their father owned it, and their grandfathers owned it. So it's a kind of combination of drawing the line, getting people to accept, and balancing it out. That's where we are. So, I mean, this is not for a jump start by the Quartet principles and say, my God, if we meet, we'll get this going. The moment you get that going, you really have something to work on, and that's number one. Number two, the last attempts to deal with this has been organized as let us eat the cake in one bite strategy. Everything or nothing, nothing agreed, if not everything is agreed. That has collapsed every time because of the exceedingly difficult way of handling it. So one of the things we need to do is to look at this kind of slightly differently from what we have been doing, because I am sure that we cannot jump from where we are to eat the cake in one bite. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And on that, we'll see you